in which to do that. They'll say silly stuff like, the Egyptians built the pyramids and they didn't even have wheels. Wow, man. Did you get free crayons with that coloring book? You really should have. God help us. Sardis dates back quite a ways, and it has a history. Now, one thing you should know about Sardis is it's famous for a couple of things. One, it is built up on the edge of a bluff. And this bluff, in some places, it's a little lower, like 700, 800, 900 foot. But on some places, like maybe 1,500 foot in sheer cliffs. And there is one big path that comes into the city. And because of this, the city believed themselves to be invulnerable. Well, that might work out well just after the flood when things are, everybody's rebuilding. Okay? But once people kind of get their act together and they form nations and they form military strategies, it did not work out so well for them. You see, they depended on the cliffs to be their defense on 3 parts of the city. They guarded the one. But what happened, and you'd think that they would learn through history, but history has a tendency to repeat itself, especially when you're not paying attention, or if your enemy isn't paying attention, but you are. You see, what happened time and time again is that nations would climb up those cliffs. They wouldn't go face all those trebuchets and onagers and spears and bows and rocks and boiling oil. They went up the cliff. Rather face the climb than all that nonsense. And time again, suddenly, like a thief showing up in the night, and you walk out to your garage, your chainsaw's missing. How'd that happen? Thief got you. In the night. All of a sudden, it's gone. And that's what kept happening to him. Is it by coincidence? And literally, this city was given a nickname in the time period when this first happened after the flood, when they were first conquered by the first city, that they were like kind of, unfortunately, given a little title. That city, and this is the title, that city was lost like a thief coming in the night. So when we read these scriptures, we realize that there's a history behind the words that they were using. Now, in the original text, both in the Greek and in the Hebrew, every word, every letter, every emphasis on a letter, Scripture says a jot and a tittle. But I contend every space between the words in Scripture means something. Now, we lose a little in the translation. Actually, we lose a lot. But I don't know about you. I'm glad I don't have to learn Greek or Hebrew or ancient Hebrew in order to understand Scripture. So I'm glad someone translated that to me. But I want to, and I want you to understand, that there is a depth in the original words. A great depth. So we look at this and we understand this was not just a, random chance of words. It referred to the history of Sardis. Another thing that you might be interested to know, that you'll run into in Scripture, especially on the breastplate of the priest, a thing called a sardine stone. Now, I don't know about you, but I've researched sardine stones. And when I first researched them, they said, well, they're a yellow-green stone, and it kind of looked like the hue of a sardine. And I'll be honest, I don't really know what a sardine looks like. You don't have too many of them around here. If we do, we have mummy chugs, but they're not a yellow-green. Well, it turns out neither is the Sardis stone. The Sardis stone is red or reddish, like the flesh of a sardine is reddish or brown. That's what a sardine stone is or looks like. Now, the problem is that this stone, the exact stone, we don't really know what it is. And that's something a lot of times these commentaries won't tell you. They'll say, well, our conclusion is this. then they'll present it as if it's fact, when in fact it's not fact. Fact requires, something to be true, and that in order to be true, it has to be retested and proven. And unfortunately, what happened over time was that the names of precious stones were changed from culture to culture to culture. And sometimes one culture would call something an amethyst that another culture didn't call that stone an amethyst, but called another stone an amethyst. And then you're beginning to say, well, it's amethyst, so it's amethyst. Well, guess what? The same thing happened with Mount Ararat. And I'm just mentioning that because it's a huge point to know in Scripture that the names of the mountains changed over time. So what we point to Mount Ararat, where the ark landed, is most likely not the mountain where the ark landed. Now, it landed on Mount Ararat for sure, but that's not where Mount Ararat is. Where the mountain they used to call is somewhere else. And that is a tease for another sermon for another day. But for today, I just want you to know about the Sardis and its history and its stone. It is special, and you will see the Sardis stone woven because of its history and all these things in the Jewish history. All right, now back to our understanding the connection between James 2 and Revelations 3, the first 6 verses, the address given by Jesus Christ to John, and John was instructed, by the way, to give this to the angel of the church. You have to consider that, and to bring that out fuller would take an entire sermon. But I want you to consider that because that's what it says. Write this to the angel of the church. Now, another thing you might not know, we'll cover that at another time. That's okay. It's an aspect of John in one of these churches. But anyway, verse 4, let's press on. It says, "Yet you have a few people in Sardis who have not soiled their names." Now, the KJV, I believe, reads that you have a few names in Sardis who have not soiled their clothes. They will walk with me dressed in white, and they are worthy. Are you telling me that the whole church of Sardis was not of the same opinion that the majority of Sardis was? Is that what you're telling me? Because it seems like that's what you're telling me. Well, I believe that's what he's saying. That accepting Jesus Christ, no matter what the quote-unquote church